3:14 a.m., Bay of Biscay, open Atlantic. No warning, no declaration, no second chances. A blip materializes on the Charles de Gaulle's radar, small, fast, and climbing. A drone, launched from a Russian intelligence ship sitting 12 nautical miles off the French carrier's port beam. The TAO in the Combat Information Center has 18 seconds. 18 seconds to determine whether that inbound signature is a surveillance pass or a kamikaze strike aimed at parking a fireball in the middle of NATO's most powerful carrier deck. If that drone is carrying even 5 pounds of high explosive and hits a Rafale M loaded with fuel on the flight deck, France's flagship is out of the war before the war has even started. But here's what the Russian commander on that spy ship didn't know. The Americans weren't waiting for the French to react. They were already aimed. They had been watching for days. And what happened next in the next 12 minutes didn't just end an incident, it rewrote the rules of gray zone warfare forever. Stay with me, because the most terrifying part of this story isn't the missile that was fired, it's the submarine that was never supposed to be there. The setup, Russia's master plan in the gray zone. To understand what exploded in the Bay of Biscay at 3:14 in the morning, you have to rewind 3 weeks to the cold, churning waters of the North Sea. The HMS Richmond, a British Type 23 frigate, was doing exactly what NATO warships do in an era of hybrid aggression. She was shadowing, tracking a convoy of Russian Shadow Fleet tankers, those deliberately uninsured, deliberately decrepit rust bucket vessels that Moscow uses like ghost ships to circumvent Western oil sanctions. 600 of them, operating globally, hiding in plain sight as commercial traffic. But the ISS had flagged something darker. These ships weren't just hauling sanctioned crude, they were hauling sensors, electronic ears pressed against the hull of the Western Alliance. Then, without warning, something happened that had never been done before in open waters against a NATO warship. A high-energy optical dazzler, a military-grade laser fired from a Russian tugboat trailing the convoy, hit the bridge of HMS Richmond directly. Not to sink her, not to kill the crew. The laser was engineered to do something far surgical: blind the ship, fry the electro-optical sensors, strip the frigate's situational awareness in a critical congested shipping lane for long enough to map her vulnerability window. For 45 seconds, HMS Richmond was effectively sightless. Moscow wasn't just harassing a frigate, they were running a diagnostic on NATO's nervous system. They wanted to see the hesitation gap. Would the British fire back? Would they escalate? Or would they retreat behind diplomatic protest? When London issued a formal protest and followed maritime protocol, the Kremlin drew a conclusion. NATO blinks. The gray zone is safe. The rules of engagement make Western navies hesitant. One more aggressive move, and they won't respond in kind. This was their first and most fatal miscalculation, because while Moscow was celebrating what they believed was a green light, the USS Arleigh Burke and the entire US 6th Fleet were doing something else entirely. They were rewriting the kill chain for every destroyer in the Atlantic, building a network weapons web so fast, so quiet, and so lethal that Russia's next gray zone move wouldn't be tested, it would be terminated. The trap, what the Jagal was really doing. The Jagal, Russian Project 864 intelligence ship, is not a warship in any conventional sense. She carries no significant armament. She carries antennas, towers of them, SIGINT suites capable of vacuuming Western electronic signatures out of the air, cataloging them, categorizing them, and transmitting them back to St. Petersburg for analysis. When she launched that drone toward the Charles de Gaulle, the Russian logic was elegant and economical. A $10,000 drone forces a $100 million radar to activate in fire control mode. The Jagal records the exact frequencies, the pulse repetition intervals, the emission signatures, data that electronic warfare units can then use to blind or spoof that radar system in a real conflict. Low cost, enormous strategic reward, and completely deniable as a navigational error or equipment malfunction. But the U.S. Navy had anticipated exactly this move. Inside the Arleigh Burke, the Aegis combat system was running in passive multi-static mode, a configuration so advanced that Russia had no reliable intelligence it even existed operationally. Instead of broadcasting radar pulses that the Jagal could detect and record, the Burke was listening, passively absorbing the ambient radio environment, commercial satellite downlinks, television broadcasts, and critically, the Jagal's own legacy navigation radar.
radar. By calculating how those existing waves deflected off the inbound drone, the Arleigh Burke had a complete firing solution, a perfect track on a hostile target, achieved without emitting a single watt of energy that the Russian ship could detect. The hunter had become invisible, and the prey didn't even know it was being hunted. 3:16 a.m., the kill chain ignites. Batteries released, bird away. A Mark 41 VLS cell on the Arleigh Burke detonated upward. A RIM-162 evolved Sea Sparrow missile screamed into the night sky on a pillar of white fire, guided not by the Burke's own radar, but by passive infrared targeting data streamed in real time from the Charles de Gaulle's sensors. The French carrier provided the eyes, the American destroyer provided the fist. This is the kill web, not a ship firing a missile, an entire alliance firing a single unified weapon. The RIM-162 ESSM can pull 50 Gs of lateral acceleration and travels at over 1,900 miles per hour. The Russian drone had no countermeasures capable of defeating a missile that maneuvered faster than physics seemed to allow. Impact: 5 miles from the carrier. The explosion was small, the message was deafening. But the retaliation had barely begun.